What are my thoughts? I'm not happy. I'm not happy with his field. I think they got to find a candidate for president that can beat Trump.
And you don't think anybody in this field
I'm
can
looking.
beat Trump?
I'm still looking.
Still looking.
What's the problem?
Obvious problems. They're all problems. Bernie Sanders is not going to be president of the United States. Guess who's going to get it now? Bernie's going to get it now. Bernie's going to ride high, and he's finally going to get scrutiny about his whole life, his ideology, his whole life, who did he root for all his life. Who is this guy ideologically? It's not just the nice, good stuff like health care. Why does he say the stuff he does about Maduro and people like that? Why does he say Denmark one week and then somebody else? I mean, people got to figure out who the guy is.
Yeah.
I think I know because I've dealt with these guys most of my adult life. They're usually the guys at the card tables at an anti-war rally. There'll be there some old guy with some old literature from this socialist party to that, trying to sell it, trying to latch on to the anti-war movement. There's always guys like that. And they're usually, you know, as Howard Fine once said, non-negotiable demands, you know, yelling up at the administration building during the anti-war movement. I know them, but I think the country's going to get to know them. I think we got a problem. We'll see. But, you know, nobody's going to say it tonight. They're all going to be cheering. Good old Bernie. You know, I think he's going to win big tonight. Real big. Real.
So what you just heard there was Chris Matthews earlier today on MSNBC News, seemingly on the verge of tears, rambling incoherently, all because Bernie Sanders is poised to win Iowa tonight. As Matthews noted, he thinks Bernie's going to win, and maybe by a large margin. And for Matthews, this isn't a good thing. But this whole series of events typifies how the neoliberal media has tried to address Bernie Sanders. They've tried everything to stop him. At first, they tried ignoring him. Then they tried lying about him. Throughout the whole process, they've tried to pump up other candidates like Harris and Klobuchar and O'Rourke and Buttigieg to try to be the alternative to Bernie when nothing else worked. But it never actually did the job. Bernie Sanders just kept getting stronger and stronger despite all these attempts by the mainstream media to stop him, to circumvent his support, to demoralize his support. And as a result, we are less than 12 hours away from the Iowa caucus, and Bernie is poised to win according to most polls. Chris Matthews is not happy about it. But in this tearful, rambling incoherence, you can hear some of the standard arguments about why Bernie Sanders would be a bad nominee. And they're all basically lies, at least to some degree. Chris Matthews notes here that Bernie Sanders can't beat Trump. He's not going to win the presidency. But that's not true. Bernie Sanders in most polls versus Trump actually polls better than him. In most hypothetical Sanders versus Trump matchups, Bernie Sanders wins. And the Real Clear Politics average has Bernie Sanders winning by a few points. Now, that's not a guarantee that Bernie will win. There's no guarantee in politics that far out from a general election. But it is to say that the polling on average says Bernie is more likely to beat Trump than not. And so to say unequivocally Bernie's not going to win is a ridiculous claim given the data that we have. Matthews also seems to suggest that Bernie Sanders is ideologically untested or unscrutinized, that he hasn't actually been challenged. He says earlier in the clip, I cut it out for brevity, that Elizabeth Warren has faced plenty of criticism, but Bernie Sanders has gotten almost none. But that's not true either. Going back his entire career, the elite forces in the Democratic and Republican Party have always tried to delegitimize Bernie Sanders, have tried to bury him and his ideology and his progressive worldview. And he's survived and indeed thrived in politics in spite of that. And going all the way back to 2015, 2016, you can recall that yes, the media at times did ignore Bernie, but they often expended great effort to try to distort Bernie's message and his ideology and his worldview and his program to potential Democratic primary voters. We of course remember that one day where the Washington Post published like 17 articles and editorials that were anti-Bernie Sanders in nature, showing that it's not that Bernie Sanders is untested, it's that Bernie Sanders has been tested, and the tests have demonstrated to increasing numbers of Americans inside the Democratic Party and even outside of it that they like Bernie Sanders and his vision for America. That's what's happening. Bernie Sanders, in some ways, has been the most tested given just how hostile the media is to him, just how hostile the Democratic Party has been to him, just how hostile key Democratic voices like Hillary Clinton have been to him. Bernie Sanders is primed and ready to face the attacks of Donald Trump because, unlike anybody else in the race, he has been consistently opposed by the powers that be in the media, outside the Democratic Party, and inside the Democratic Party. And this idea that Bernie Sanders is just some man rambling on, shouting at the establishment without any ideas is absurd. Because while yes, Bernie Sanders has been unafraid to call out the powers that be, and Bernie Sanders has been unafraid to associate himself not just with respectable actors, but with regular people who are damn angry and damn right to be angry about this current affair of American politics and economics and wider society. Bernie Sanders has never shied away from that. But to say that Bernie Sanders is offering no concrete policies, to say that Bernie Sanders isn't able to compromise or isn't willing to compromise or isn't willing to work within the constraints of politics is not true. Bernie Sanders has forged working relationships when he was in the Congress, when he was mayor, when he's been in the Senate. He's worked with Republicans even now and then on things like opposing Trump's unilateral action in Iran. Bernie Sanders has demonstrated the ability to cooperate. Bernie Sanders has demonstrated the ability to combine protest and pragmatic action. And if you don't think that Bernie Sanders and his vision has influenced things, just look at how many people have tried to suggest that they've adopted Bernie Sanders programs, either in whole or in part, because even if they don't like Bernie Sanders and his ideas, they know they're popular. Look at all the people using the words Medicare for all, even when they don't support Medicare for all, because they know that Bernie Sanders and his team and his people and his vision have made that concept popular. And as a result, it can't be ignored if you want to actually win over large proportions of the Democratic base, especially younger and more progressive voters. Bernie Sanders isn't just yelling from outside the room to the people that are actually doing the work. Bernie Sanders is on the inside fundamentally changing how the Democratic Party relates to working and middle class people and what vision that party is going to put forward to the American people, not just this election, but going forward. And even if Bernie doesn't win, the party will never be the same because of his activism. So what Chris Matthews has said on all of these fronts is wrong. Bernie Sanders is tested. Bernie Sanders can defeat Trump. Bernie Sanders has done more than just complain from outside the structures. Bernie Sanders is ready. He's primed. He's focused to win this nomination, to defeat Donald Trump, and to build a better society. And here's the thing. Chris Matthews really isn't on the verge of tears because he worries that Bernie Sanders is going to lose to Trump. He's on the verge of tears because he realizes that Bernie Sanders is going to roll over the Democratic field, he's going to defeat Trump, and he's going to prove people like Chris Matthews wrong, not just now, but over their entire careers about what is possible and what is reasonable in American politics. That's why he's scared. That's why he's rambling. That's why he's tearful. It's because Bernie's going to win, not because Bernie can't win.